Hey everybody, welcome to the video. So we're going my core plays for week 1 of the NFL season over on Draftkings. All I did in this video was I took a handful of some of my favorite plays on the slate and guys that have a really good chance of making my main lineup. I threw them on a quick video or slideshow for you guys that should only take around 10 to 15 minutes. My first thoughts video, my final thoughts video tend to take pretty long, around 30 minutes, around a half an hour. So I'm going to try to keep this one more shorter and condensed that's later on in the week because I know a lot of you are probably in a time crunch. So I'm going to try to keep this video decently short with just some of my favorite plays on the entire slate. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. And we're all season long trying to help you guys become better NFL DFS players that cover other sports as well. So if you keep coming back to the channel each and every single day or each and every single week, you might as well hit the subscribe button and turn the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new videos. And also, if we hit 6K subscribers tomorrow, that would be absolutely awesome. I think we're like 15 subs away. So if we do hit it, thank you very much. I do appreciate each and every single one of you guys. And if you don't follow me on social media, they're right down in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen. And if you want to support my content over on Patreon, always much appreciated. We got 300 plus people. You can hop into the Discord chat and just get access to all the extra content that I put out throughout the entire week, including the cheat sheet with all the notes on players that I have interest in, and the entire data sheet as well. So if you're interested, links down below. I also cover other sports as well. If you're not interested, hey, that's fine. Let's just dive into this weekend's slate. Alright, so our core play for me today is going to be Christian McCaffrey. He comes in at a massive price tag at $10,000. I do realize he might be a bit of a tough fit in your lineup, but there's enough value to get it done. We have some cheap receivers that I find very interesting on this slate. Then we also have the new addition of Boston Scott at only $4,800, who's going to be one of the highest owned players on the entire slate. So I really don't think it's going to be that hard to fit in Christian McCaffrey, especially if you go cheap at quarterback. I don't think he's a must play for tournaments, but in cash games, if you can lock the safest player on the entire slate in your lineup, I would typically feel pretty good about it. Now, I know there could be some questions because there is a new coach and there's a new quarterback, so I guess we don't know exactly how much he's going to be used like he did last year, if he's going to play 100% of the snaps, if he's going to get nearly double-digit targets per game, if he's going to get nearly 20 rushing attempts per game. I'd have to assume it's going to be pretty close to it. It might not be all the way up there, but it should be close, and the game plan should be to get their best player of the ball. That is easily Christian McCaffrey. He pretty much scored over 20 Draftkings points in almost every single game last season, and this is a pretty good matchup here versus the Raiders, who were 29th DVA versus the run last season. Now, if we're just looking at the volume for CMC last season, he was averaging over 60 receiving yards per game, nearly 8.5 targets per game, and nearly 18 rushing attempts per game. So you're pretty much getting like a running back 1 and a wide receiver 2 when you roster CMC. So he comes in at a super expensive price tag, but it's kind of like you're getting 2 players in 1. So I actually don't mind that price tag. And look, you're going to get with a 22% target share last season and a 35% weighted opportunity share. Again, these numbers may come down just a little bit because it was a historic season. And again, the quarterback did change and the coach did change. But the game plan here for the Panthers should be to get their best player of the ball, and that is easily Christian McCaffrey. He's also not game flow dependent, so even if they're down, they'll just throw in the ball. If they're up, they'll hand him the rock a bunch of times. So love CMC, and if you're playing cash games, he's a very safe option on this slate. And I'm going to do my best to find enough value to get him in. When I was running around, when I was playing around with my builds, I do have to go cheaper at quarterback and then cheaper with Boston Scott and some cheap options at wide receiver. But I can fit in CMC. It's not really that bad either. So McCaffrey is my core play number 1, and we'll go to core play number 2 in Josh Jacobs, who's on the other side of this game of Christian McCaffrey. And I don't typically love playing the same running back, or the 2 running backs in the same game, but Christian McCaffrey is kind of like a wide receiver, so it kind of negates that theory. But love Josh Jacobs here. I love the price tag, and I love the matchup, and I do imagine he's going to be one of the highest owned running backs on the entire slate. I mean, the guy's just super talented. We know he's going to get the ball quite a bit, and this is a great matchup versus the Panthers. If we're looking at just the numbers last season, the Carolina Panthers defense versus running backs, it was rough. They were 28th DVA versus the run, allowed nearly 32 Draftkings points per game, over 125 rushing yards per game, and nearly 2 rushing touchdowns per game. And if Josh Jacobs, his only issue last season was he just wasn't really involved in the passing game, there's talks about him getting like double the targets, double the receptions this season. If that happens, he's going to be a fantastic play at this price tag. So at 6,800, an elite matchup here. And don't forget, the Panthers did lose Luke Kuechly and some other options on defense as well. So this matchup could get even softer, and that's just kind of a scary sight for the Panthers defense. So definitely love Josh Jacobs at 6,800. I think he's a perfect RB2 to pair with a guy like Christian McCaffrey, or if you don't want to pay up for Christian McCaffrey, he could be an excellent RB1 option as well. So definitely love Josh Jacobs. The matchup is great, the talent is there, and the price is nice as well. And then core play number 3 is another running back, but I think a lot of my builds, especially in cash games, is going to have a 3 running back approach. I really like the CMC, Josh Jacobs, and then Boston Scott in the flex approach. But he's going to be the chalk running back this week, and I don't really think it's going to be too close. And this is another reason why you can't fit in CMC, because you're getting pretty much a full-on starting running back at $4,800. Now, the reason we like Boston Scott a lot is because Miles Sanders is not traveling with the team, and he is out for this game, meaning Boston Scott is going to be the main guy here. This is a pretty good matchup versus the Washington football team, who did struggle with running backs quite a bit last season. Just looking at their numbers, they were 23rd DVOA versus the run, allowed over 30 DraftKings points per game to running backs, over 120 rushing yards per game, and about 0.7 rushing touchdowns per game as well. And I know it's only a 1-game sample size, but when Boston Scott was the main guy last year, it was Week 16 versus the New York Giants. He did score 35.8 DraftKings points, had 19 rushing attempts for 54 yards and 3 touchdowns. Again, you can't expect him to get 3 touchdowns, but the volume was there, and he's also involved in the passing game as well. We had 4 catches for 84 yards and 6 targets. So if he's going to get anything close to that workload at 4,800, he is easily the best value play on the entire slate. And I feel like he's pretty much a cash game lock at this point. And I'm kind of glad that Miles Sanders isn't playing, because it gets rid of the question mark if we should play Miles Sanders. It also makes Boston Scott a very easy cash plug-in. And before that, Antonio Gibson was pretty much the chalk cash plug-in at our flex spots for the most part. I didn't feel too great about that, because that can easily be a committee. And I'm not saying Boston Scott's going to get every single touch in the backfield here, but I'm feeling pretty comfortable with Boston Scott in cash games at 4,800 versus the Washington football team defense. So definitely like him as core play number 3 or my RB3 on this slate. Then we'll move on to some wide receivers here. And we'll start with Devonta Adams. He comes in at a pretty nice price point at $7,300, and he's my favorite spend-up wide receiver on this slate. Now, I'd put quotation marks because Michael Thomas is a spend-up wide receiver. He's all the way at $9,000. But if you're playing CMC, which I do like CMC quite a bit, there is no chance you're going to be able to fit in Michael Thomas on this slate as well. You're pretty much picking between the two, and I'll pretty much always slide with I'll pretty much always side with a running back if I had to pick between a wide receiver, because they can always tend to be a little bit more volatile. But love Devonta Adams here. It's a very nice price point. And the Minnesota Vikings defense, it is pretty solid, but they did struggle versus wide receivers specifically last season. And Devonta Adams, he is the wide receiver 1 for Aaron Rodgers, and that just means he's going to get a ton of volume here. He's pretty much only the only capable pass catcher on this offense, so it's pretty much just going to be the ball. Pretty much Aaron Rodgers is just going to force feed Devonta Adams the ball a ton, and that's what we saw last season as well. Like, if you just want to look at his target numbers last season, he had 11, 10, 12, 10, 6, 13, 16, 13, 11, and 11. And that game he had 16 targets was against this exact Vikings team. And he had 13 catches for 116 yards and scored 26.6 DraftKings points. So, obviously, he's a very talented receiver. He's the wide receiver 1 for Aaron Rodgers. He's going to get the ball a ton here. And it is a beatable matchup as a wide receiver versus the Minnesota Vikings. So, love Devonta Adams. I love the price point. I do have to imagine he's going to be pretty chalky on this slate. And then the next core play here, it's a pretty easy one in Marvin Jones Jr. at $5,500. I did not have him on any of the previous video because I didn't know if Kenny Golladay was going to play or not. Well, he is listed as out, so Marvin Jones should check in as one of the higher owned wide receivers on this slate. He is a pretty excellent cash game pick as well, because if you're looking at what Kenny Golladay is leaving behind, looking at his numbers last season, he's leaving behind a 20% target share, a 53% weighted opportunity share, over 7 targets per game, and 75 receiving yards per game as well. And we know Matthew Stafford's going to be chucking the ball, and Marvin Jones is going to be the big benefactor here. Now, if we're looking at Marvin Jones' numbers last season, I mean, he was seeing nearly 7 targets per game and 19% target share. We also know he's a guy that can beat a team deep. So I like Marvin Jones quite a bit because Kenny Golladay is leaving behind quite a bit of targets, and that's going to funnel to guys I think like Marvin Jones, TJ Hawkinson. So at only $5,500, you got to like him here. Now I wouldn't say the matchup versus the Bears is great, as Chicago was 8th DVOA versus the pass last season, allowed less than 30 DraftKings points per game to wide receivers, only 143 receiving yards, only half a touchdown per game. But I like the projected volume here. Matthew Stafford's a guy that I know is going to throw the ball quite a bit. He's also not afraid to throw the deep ball. Marvin Jones definitely excels at that, and he's a big body target. So definitely like him at this price point. I do think he's going to be very high owned on this slate. Now we'll move on to the last core play of this video. And it's going to be Terry McLaurin here at 5,600. So the Washington football team is 6-point underdogs at home. So I think they're going to be passing the ball quite a bit. And really the only guy they have to pass the ball to that's got like a lot of talent is Terry McLaurin at 5,600. This is a pretty beatable matchup versus the Philadelphia Eagles secondary. Now I know they did add Darius Slay, but he really wasn't the best cornerback in the world last season. Yeah, he had some solid games when he was shadowing, but I wouldn't say he's someone I'm going to just run for the hills, like get away from. I think McLaurin should be fine here, and I'm not even sure if he's going to shadow. I mean, it would make sense if he does, but either way, I think he's going to be fine here. The Eagles secondary, if you're looking at their numbers last season, they were 16th DVOA versus the pass, but allowed over 40 DraftKings points here into wide receivers, 175 receiving yards per game, and 1.31 touchdowns per game. And also, in his two matchups versus the Eagles last season, he did very, very well. Like in his first NFL game, week 1, he did score 26.5 DraftKings points versus the Eagles, 125 yards and a touchdown. Then week 15 versus the Eagles, he scored 27 DraftKings points, 130 yards and a touchdown on 5 catches. So I know they added Darius Slay, but for the most part, McLaurin should be fine here, especially if you're going to be throwing the ball quite a bit. You got to get your chemistry with Dwayne Haskins. So I think 5,600 is actually a pretty easy plug-in. I do think he's going to be pretty popular. I think he's a fine cash game option as well. The volume should be there. The talent's there. I wouldn't say I love Dwayne Haskins throwing the ball, but game script should work in their favor as well. And at only 5,600, he's a pretty easy fit into our lineups. But I think that's going to be it for the video, guys. This was a pretty short video. This might be the shortest video I have recorded on this channel in about a year. So I said I'd make it condensed, and I did. So if you want a more in-depth analysis on any of these guys, check out the final thoughts video. Check out the first look video. Went more into the stats, and I did have the data sheet on the screen, but just thought I'd throw their pictures up here and the price tags and their names just to keep it simple for you guys. But I appreciate you watching. If you haven't already, make sure you leave a like on the video. And if you're new to the channel, hit that subscribe button. Really helps me out. I really do appreciate it. Follow me on social media. In the bottom left-hand corner of the video, you can see my handles. ChrisPennell16 on Twitter. CPen16 over on IG. And again, if you want to support me on Patreon, always much appreciated. Links down in the description below. If not, that's totally fine. But I'll see you guys in the next video, and I hope you enjoy Football Sunday.